What's going on? Another Wildcast podcast coming your way on Apple, Spotify, other podcasting platforms, and also Tucson.com if you're watching the video version of the podcast. I'm Justin Spears here with Michael Lev, and per usual, talking all things Arizona Wildcats football and also Big 12 with our Big 12 Bonanza picks. We'll go through the full slate of games later on in the podcast, and then, of course, we'll wrap things up previewing Arizona versus Colorado, which is a fun one, right? This week we got homecoming, 1 p.m. kickoff. It should be very beautiful in Tucson, Arizona. I know that the month of October has been warmer than usual in Arizona, but I think that weather at kickoff should be absolutely beautiful. 1 p.m. on Fox. It should not be hot as hell, but it still should be very warm and just pleasant. And then you got Colorado and Arizona. It should be a fun one on Saturday. I can't wait, Liv.
I think it's a good thing for the fans, of course, that the weather is going to be nice. Probably would have been more advantageous for the Wildcats if it were really hot, because Colorado's not used to that, and the Wildcats are. But we'll take it. We'll also take that 1 p.m. kickoff, which is obviously better for us. Little inside baseball here. Like when there is an 8 o'clock kickoff or a 7:30 kickoff, we are getting out of Arizona Stadium at what, 1 a.m., 1:30, staying up till 3, 4 a.m., working on our stories, me working on my AP Top 25, this sort of thing. And it's rough. And I know that in a 1 p.m. game, totally different story. I know that for the fans too, like, especially if you're driving from far away, like those late games can be really difficult on people. So I think everyone is pretty happy about having this this rare 1 o'clock kickoff at home. The weather is going to cooperate. Should be a real good scene at Arizona Stadium on Saturday.
I think it's the first time Arizona's had an afternoon kickoff in October at home since 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Your first year.
I want to say,
okay,
I want to say there was one against USC between then and now.
No, that was the game. That was Khalil Tate's first ever start.
Oh, that was that game. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Man, okay. They all kind of blend together after a while. Yeah, I mean, look, there's never going to be any afternoon games at Arizona Stadium in September unless you're playing college football 25, where they seem to want to put Arizona in the afternoon in September all the time. The robots are immune to the weather conditions. And then, with climate change, like October's been warm until very recently. Like it was super pleasant last night after the sun went down. Front's going to come through on Friday, and we're going to have some what you call football weather, at the stadium on Saturday. So, to use a bad pun here, can Arizona weather the storm of Colorado's passing attack? That's my biggest question coming into this game with all the injuries that Arizona has in the secondary, and Colorado's injuries kind of looking a little more, optimistic than people initially thought after the Kansas State game. That matchup worries me a lot, Justin, a lot. What's your assessment of who's going to play for the Wildcats in the back end on Saturday?
A lot of people are worried about Tacario Davis and his status. And of course, he's the biggest name out of all of those guys. And I was talking with some colleagues after the press conference yesterday, and I feel like circumstances matter when it comes to those questionable injuries, right? If Arizona was playing against, let's say, Houston, I don't think Tacario Davis is playing. But since they are playing against Colorado, who not only has Travis Hunter, but Jimmy Horn Jr., I think LeJontay Wester is also a really good player. Like Colorado's receivers, they're loaded. And so I think those matchups, this is what I call an NFL draft stock game. For guys like Travis Hunter, this is not only an NFL draft stock game, but this is a Heisman game too, because of the matchups against Tacario Davis when he's on offense, and then when he's on defense, he's going to be matching up against Tetairoa McMillan. When you have those two matchups under your belt and you look good, I think that's certainly going to help Travis Hunter in the Heisman race against Ashton Ginty from Boise State. But for a guy like Tacario Davis, he's a projected late first-round pick in some NFL mock drafts. And there's going to be nearly 20 NFL scouts. There could be more at the moment, Thursday morning, when we're recording this podcast, per U of A, there are, I think, 17 credentialed NFL scouts for Saturday's game. And to put that into perspective, usually there's about 3, 4, 5 at the most.
Yep.
We're talking about nearly 20. So there's going to be a lot of NFL attention on this game. And Takaria Davis is one of those prospects that's going to be, trying to get into the first round after this year. So I think the fact that he's going up against some pretty notable players in Colorado, I think he likes that challenge and isn't ducking that. It wants to figure out a way to get himself into the game, even if he's not completely 100%. So I'm leaning towards Takaria Davis playing on Saturday. Of course, things can change, but heck, outside of Takaria Davis, you got Traden Stukes, who is probably Arizona's most versatile defensive back. You got Gunnar Maldonado, who has really done an exceptional job improving as a free safety. You don't have that. And Arizona's just banged up right now in the secondary. And not only that, but you got Marquise Groves-Killebrew, who's also banged up. Emmanuel Carnley is not 100%. We're talking about guys like Jack Luttrell and Demetrius Freeney, who have not really played in the secondary prior to last game, and now they have been thrusted into some very important roles. And then on top of that, Lev, this would be the perfect game for the dollar package. But who are you going to throw out there? A lot of guys are hurt, and Arizona's pretty thin at secondary. So I think Arizona has some guys that can compete with Colorado on Saturday, but it doesn't look well for the Wildcats. I will say that.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to just play a lot of zone in their base package, which is a 4-2-5. Tay Brown has played really well this season, kind of quietly, had a very nice year. In my cat stats feature this week, I'm gonna lean toward like encouraging signs for the Wildcats amid all the gloom and doom. And he's going to be one of the players that I spotlight. I'm not sure you want to take him off the field, honestly. So I think they're going to play base, and I think they're going to play a lot of zone. They're going to have to hope that their front four can get home and get pressure on Shedeur Sanders. He's the most sacked quarterback in the Big 12. It can be done. The front's going to have to perform better than they did at BYU, though. They had only 7 pressures in that game. They had no sacks. They are going to have to get it done with 4 and then try to play as much coverage as they can. Try to keep, prevent the big plays, force Colorado to incrementally make its way downfield. And maybe they give up a sack fumble, an interception, make some mistakes, settle for field goals. A lot of things that have befallen the Arizona offense. I would also say that this is a week where it would be great to lean on the offense, right? With your defense banged up. But the way that Arizona's offense has played lately, I don't know if you can count on that because they've been so inconsistent, so lacking in rhythm. So like whatever the opposite of like capitalizing is on drives, that's what they're doing. So many empty possessions, quarterbacks getting hit too much, like the litany of issues that we've been discussing for weeks and weeks. I don't know if all that's going to change. Maybe it does. Maybe this is the week that it starts to click. But man, the offense has really got to do its part because the defense is shorthanded.
And doing their part is scoring touchdowns. I know it's simple to say that because that is the whole point of football, is scoring more touchdowns and more points than the other team. But Arizona just has not done that this season. I mean, really, ever since the season opener against New Mexico, the Wildcats have put up less than 20 points per game at 18.6, which is not winning football. And on top of that, they're also turning the ball over. And I know that turnover on downs isn't really considered a turnover, but if you look at the last 5 games, Arizona has 30 trips on the other side of the field whenever they pass the 50, and they have only scored 8 touchdowns. So they're scoring touchdowns at a 27% clip. And then in addition to that, they got I think 4 interceptions and then 4 turnover on downs during that time in those 30 drives. Like, you cannot do that. You can't just rely on Tyler Loop and your defense to carry you throughout the game. It worked against Utah, right? And Noah Fafita made two very critical throws on third down against the Utes in that final or one of the final drives there, which was kind of like the knockout punch. But outside of that, Arizona's offense really wasn't getting anything going in that game. And I look at that Texas Tech game, Arizona dominated time of possession, right? They held on to the ball. They did everything they could do, but they weren't scoring. And I think if Arizona can keep doing what they're doing, but also just figure out a way to be more effective and efficient between the 0 to 30-yard line, then I think that defense that's so banged up, I think will certainly be helped with the offense. They got to figure out a way to score touchdowns. Oh, you're on mute, Lev.
This is the week to me where you have to lean on your offensive line and your running game. Colorado gave up well over 200 yards last week against Kansas State on the ground. Final tally was, I'm looking at it was 185 on the ground. But they kind of imposed their physicality more and more. Those Wildcats did as the game went on. We have seen signs of a good running game for Arizona. Again, consistency has been lacking, but like Quali Conley, when he gets a crease, he runs really hard. He breaks tackles. Kedrick Reesino, big and powerful. You've got to run the ball, impose your physicality, win time of possession, keep the opposing offense, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, the wide receiver version of Travis Hunter, on the sideline. To me, that's the path in this game. So Arizona is tied for the second fewest rushing attempts in the Big 12. Colorado has the fewest. Arizona has had one game this season where they've had more rushing attempts than passing attempts, and that was the NAU game. And it was barely a difference between the two. In the last two games, granted, they've been behind a lot, but they've had 101 passing attempts and 62 rushing attempts.
Damn.
Like, I think that's nowhere close to 50-50. I know this, like, we're in a world where most teams aren't in a 50-50 situation anymore, but it's got to be closer to that. I would love to see Arizona run the ball 45 times in this game. And whatever the results are. But like I said, you keep Colorado's offense on the sideline, and you also take some pressure off of Noah Fifita. Like, when I watch Noah Fifita right now, I just feel like he's like taking the weight of the program on his shoulders and just trying to do everything. And like, Noah, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. And we've heard some language from the coaches this week that suggests that they're thinking the same way. Like, we need to help this guy out. He's getting hit too much. I think he's trying to do too much. And one way to, fix that problem is to run the damn ball.
Yeah. I feel like Noah Fifita doesn't have the sophomore slump or the yips or anything like that. I just feel like he is really trying to do too much. And, last year he came in as the breath of fresh air in Arizona's offense and wasn't really trying to do too much. And I don't think he had to do too much when you had guys like Tanner McLaughlin and Jacob Cowing on your side too. Protection-wise, you're being protected by Jordan Morgan and Jonas Avianaya. Like, it's very easy to run the offense when you have all the right pieces in place. And now I feel like as Arizona tries to find its identity on offense with some of those missing pieces, I feel like Noah is like putting all this pressure on himself to make that big play. And in the end, it honestly hurts Arizona because he's trying to throw that crazy touchdown pass to whoever's in the end zone, and it ends up getting intercepted. It just totally kills all their momentum.
Yeah, we've talked about some of the numbers that support that. His ADOT, his average depth of target, currently at 9.4 yards. It was 7.8 yards last year, so more throws down the field. And then his average time to throw is 3.23 seconds. And last year it was 2.55 seconds, which means he's holding the ball on average 0.68 seconds longer every time he drops back. And why does that happen? That's because you're not seeing the field. You're not you're finding that initial outlet. You're holding the ball, trying to make a big play happen, trying to make something out of nothing. When sometimes the best deal is to just dump the ball off, get a couple yards, and move on to the next down.
Yeah.
I don't know, like that wasn't who he was last year, and I don't know if like schematically they had just put him in such a great position to succeed. Maybe if they were scheming receivers open better than this staff has done, but he just hasn't looked like the same player from a decision-making standpoint. There's nothing physically, there's nothing different. I would argue, like, in some ways, physically, he's more impressive. Like, his sack avoidance has
Yeah.
gotten way better than it was last year. That was kind of to me, when you comparing him to Jaden Delora, that was one of the areas where Jaden Delora was actually better, you know? But sometimes that can work to your detriment, keeping plays alive, holding onto the ball, trying to force the issue down the field. That has those things have worked against him and worked against the Wildcats. Obviously, when you're turning the ball over as much as they have, cannot afford to do that. Period.
And one thing I have noticed, you actually pointed this out when we were walking outside of the Arizona football facility, was the coaches have really emphasized protecting Noah Fafita. Like, we got to protect him more, which is not just, you think offensive line, but it's Arizona trying to put the receivers in the right routes and have concepts to where Noah Fafita can get the ball out of his hands faster. And I kind of felt bad for Noah at the end of that game because, I mean, he was having a bad game, but yet they were still throwing him out there. And man, he was just getting hit just time after time after time. And that one against Tyler Batty that knocked him out of the end zone and then followed up by the pick six, you almost like kind of feel bad for Noah Fafita. And honestly, Lev, like, you look at Noah Fafita's struggles, and I've been, looking at Arizona fans on Twitter. I feel like Arizona fans feel bad for Noah Fafita. Like, you don't really see, I mean, there are some fans that are like, oh, you got to bench him, which, listen, fans can get, a little irrational, right? And really be over dramatic when it comes to these kind of things. But I feel like a majority of Arizona's fan base, they almost feel bad for Noah Fafita. Whereas last year, they all wanted Jaden Delora out of the game as soon as possible.
Yeah, in some ways, he's a sympathetic character. He's stand-up guy, right? Like, he always takes all of the blame and responsibility on himself, which is admirable. Seems to be a young man of high character, doesn't duck the media or any of those obligations. He always comes out there. But again, like, his mindset is it's all on me. And I think that can work against him sometimes. Like, it doesn't need to be all on you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was on the podcast that we talked about this or on the radio show this week, but like, be that point guard again.
Be Chris Paul.
Not the ball dominant point guard who's gonna take it to the rack every time, but distribute. You've got playmakers, right? Like, one of the encouraging things to come out of that BYU game is Remello Murphy finally got involved a little bit in the offense. So there's another guy. You've obviously got T-Mac. Ian Burnett's been playing well. Quali Conley can catch passes out of the backfield. Montana Lamonius Craig has played pretty well of late. Like, get the ball out of your hands. Let the playmakers do their thing. You don't have to, put all of this on yourself.
Before we go into Big 12 Bonanza, this game between Arizona and Colorado, of course, the Wildcats won in a thriller last year. Tyler Loop kicked the walk-off field goal. That was a awesome game down in Boulder, how Arizona was able to win that game. But, Lev, you were in Boulder recently for their game against Kansas State. Of course, we got Deion Sanders, a.k.a. Prime Time, Coach Prime, whatever nickname you want to give him, coming down to Tucson. And it's been interesting to see Deion Sanders over the last couple of years at Colorado, because last year they had such a fast start and they were like the national college football darlings. Like, they were so popular that even the Starbucks down in Tucson, Arizona off Prince and Campbell was selling Colorado cups. I'm like, what? This Starbucks is like a mile away from the U of A campus, and yet they are selling Colorado cups. Like, that's how popular they were. And then, of course, they fizzled out. Then they got defensive and offensive linemen this year. They look much better this year. Shedeur Sanders is leading the Big 12 in passing. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think about the Deion Sanders tenure at Colorado, and also what's next for him after this year?
Yeah, I mean, certain parts of it have been disappointing and frustrating. He hasn't been as aggressive in high school recruiting as I think we all thought he would be. Like, I think one of the reasons that you hire Deion Sanders is he walks into the living room and he's going to get whoever he wants. He's relied heavily on the transfer portal. I think the reason that he's done that is to maximize this window. You know, you've got, he knew he's going to have Shedeur and Travis for 2 years, right? So I think that's been disappointing. Like some of the like petty grievances, like banning the Denver Post columnist Sean Keeler from asking questions because of his quote unquote personal attacks. Like, I don't know. Can we just focus on football a little bit here? On the other hand, like the scene in Boulder was amazing. It was a packed house. I saw people wearing Prime gear all over the city. I saw that stuff being sold every place. Like, he's famous.
Yeah.
I think he's the most well-known, famous coach in college football, and I don't even think it's close. I mean, he was a Major League Baseball player. He was an NFL player. He was on TV. He's been in a gazillion commercials. So, like, he's bringing a lot of attention to Colorado, which is a positive for that program because they were irrelevant in every shape and form before he got there. I mean, they were flat out terrible before he arrived. So those are good things. They're tracking toward making a bowl game, which they've had only, I think, 3 bowl appearances in 17 years or 18 years. They made it in 2020 when they were 4-2. I mean, whatever. That doesn't like even count. It's barely a season, the weirdest season ever in the Pac-12 back then. And I think that a lot of like what you see in the viral clips is just for show, you know, and it's like the cameras are on, the lights are on. I'm going to act a certain way. I don't think he's like that on a day-to-day basis. After the loss to Kansas State the other night, like super polite. Everybody, how you doing? Hey, how you doing, coach? How you doing? He apparently has a ladies first policy, like a female reporter gets the first question in every single presser that they have. So that's a lot of, I don't know, that does not jibe with what I think the image that people have of him. And like I said, I think a lot of it's for show, a lot of it's for entertainment purposes, and they are an entertaining team. Like, they are a fun team to watch no matter what happens. A lot of their games go down to the wire. They have a wide open offense. They have a lot of exciting athletes. I think, you know, it would behoove Arizona to make this into a real boring game. You know, make this into a ground war instead of a fancy aerial display.
Make this into a Iowa Hawkeyes performance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ugly but wins.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like I said, I love to see 40 to 45 rushing attempts from Arizona in this game.
Speaking of rushing attempts, did you see what Travis Hunter said about Ashton Jeanty? And like,
did not. No.
So he was on the RG3 podcast, and they asked about how he feels about the Heisman race, and he says, "Oh, if I got the ball, 95 times like he does, if I had 95 catches, then I would be more of a Heisman favorite. But because he gets the ball way more than me, he kind of has the edge in this. But I'm the two-way player. How many two-way players have you seen in college football?" I'm like, well, I think Charles Woodson was a pretty solid two-way player. I know it doesn't happen often, and in my opinion, I think Travis Hunter is number one on my Heisman ballot just because of all the different things that he does. But to kind of discredit Ashton Jeanty and what he's been able to do, that to me was a little concerning. I'm like, listen, Ashton Jeanty is a one-man show at Boise State right now. People are watching Boise State football because of Ashton Jeanty, and he is carrying them to wins, and he's putting up insane numbers right now. He deserves all the Heisman attention that he is getting. So I love Travis Hunter as a player and a personality. I think his head is in the right place, but on this one, I think he's a little off.
I think he's probably just campaigning for himself. It's definitely hard to win the Heisman when you don't have the statistics, and if Travis stays healthy, he'll have plenty of good numbers, for a wide receiver. Wide receivers don't ever win the Heisman. I mean, the appeal for him is that he plays full time 2 ways. The distinction between him and a Charles Woodson is Charles just dabbled on offense. He didn't play every snap. Like if Travis is healthy, he plays every snap. I think the biggest thing that could hold him back is injury. Like if he has to come out of this Arizona game because of the shoulder, and he misses time, that's going to really hurt him because it's a very tight race right now. I think it's a two horse race between the two of those guys. It always changes over the course of the year, and I'm sure there will be quarterbacks who emerge as time goes on, who kind of insert themselves into that race. But I would say that I'm glad that there's a couple West Coast ish programs that are kind of leading the way for the Heisman, because how the sport is very tilted toward the East Coast, the Southeast, etc. To have
I
a
didn't
guy
even
from
think of that.
Colorado and a guy from Boise State as the top two
Could you put Dylan
Heisman
Gabriel
candidates,
in that conversation too?
man, after the game he had the other night, I mean, maybe he was the favorite on a lot of people's lists coming into the year. And man, I don't know if you watched any of that game against
I did
Ohio
not.
State, but it feels like those schools are playing a different sport. I got to tell you, like that was like, at least when they're chucking the ball around the yard, like a lot of NFL talent
Mhm.
out there. That was a very high level football game. And which makes a lot of sense because those two teams have been two of the biggest spenders in the NIL space. They recruit really well anyways. I mean, Ohio State's been the wide receiver factory of college football for several years now. Um, but yeah, Dylan Gabriel certainly could sneak in there if Oregon keeps winning, because quarterbacks always get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the Heisman, at least over the last like 10, 15 years.
Now's the time for everyone's favorite segment, Big 12 Bonanza. Lev is not looking forward to this segment because he
I
did
say
not
not
do
my
so well.
favorite. No, no, nope, not my favorite. So last week, I was feeling really good about myself after I was the only one who took ASU against the spread. They obviously won the game outright. So I'm like, yeah, this is great. I did not win another game against the spread the rest of the weekend. So I went 1-4 to drop my record to 25-25. Both Justin and Brett Farah, our sports editor, were 2-3 against the spread. They are both 26-24. In the straight up race, Brett is 32-18 on the season. I am 31-19. Justin is 30-20. So it's all still pretty jumbled. A very tight race. I think you called it parity last week. I said it was mediocrity. Whatever whatever phrase you want to use, that's where we are. All right, so we have another Friday game. Big 12 has gone in on Fridays, which I think is a really good idea because you get that exclusive broadcast window a lot of times. And it's the red hot BYU Cougars, number 13 in the country, hosting Oklahoma State, coming off a bye and really slumping in a big way. This game is at 7:15 p.m. Arizona time. It's on ESPN. Oklahoma State is getting 9.5 points. Did you hear about this thing with Mike Gundy this week, Justin, where
No.
he got headbutted apparently by one of his own cattle, and got like a black eye, and his like face is all messed up, and he didn't like do his in-person radio appearance
At the old folks'
at
home?
the old folks home because of this. So that's not great for our guy Gundy. They also might bench Alan Bowman at this point in the season because he's been struggling and the offense has been struggling. Garrett Rangel would likely be the quarterback there. Obviously, BYU's played really well. They're third in the league in scoring offense. They're second in scoring defense. Going up against an Oklahoma State team that is last in the league in rushing defense. BYU takes the ball away. They have 14 takeaways, which is the most in the league. So like every statistical measure favors BYU. Home game at night favors BYU. As much as I would like to go the other way and say they're due for a letdown. Oklahoma State coming off a bye. I just can't do it. I can't pull the trigger on it. So I'm taking BYU to win and to cover the 9.5.
I can't believe I'm doing this, Lev. I'm going with Oklahoma State to pull off the upset.
To win.
I'm going with the Cowboys to
To
win
win. Oh
on the
my.
road
Okay.
against BYU, just because I think about where Arizona was at, just a few weeks ago. And, they were struggling a little bit. Big loss to Kansas State, went into a bye week, and then they went on the road and beat a top 10 Utah team. And I think the Big 12 is so intoxicated this year. They have just spent, like John Wilner said on the radio show this week, it's like the Big 12 has just spent an entire weekend at dirtbags, just drinking all weekend. The Big 12 is so drunk that I think that Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, this week, they're going to figure out a way to get Ollie Gordon going. Ollie Gordon is the defending Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. He is one of the better running backs in all of college football. They have not really gotten him going this year. The run game has really been MIA. And I think that this is the week where we talk about Arizona making it ugly against Colorado. I think Oklahoma State, even if they have a quarterback change, I think they make it ugly. And I think they squeak one out against BYU. I think BYU is a great football team, and it would not surprise me if we see them contending for a Big 12 championship when it's all said and done. But I'm going with the Cowboys to pull off the upset.
This is a shocker. I was not expecting this at all. Brett is taking BYU to win and Oklahoma State to cover. So he sees a close game. I could see it happening. I really wanted to do it, but I just can't. All right. So moving on to Saturday slate now. We got a 9 a.m. Tucson time kickoff between ASU and Cincinnati in Cincinnati. This game is on ESPN Plus. Sun Devils are getting 5 points. Big headline out of this one is Sam Levitt is not playing. Suffered a rib injury against Utah. He is out for this game, which means Jeff Sims is in. When Jeff Sims was in the game the other night, they ran a totally different offense. Like it was like all zone reads, and they were not throwing the ball downfield very much at all. So Kenny Dillingham is very clever as an offensive coordinator. I'm sure he'll adjust quite a bit. I have concerns for ASU traveling across the country and playing in a 9 a.m. game.
Yeah.
Like NFL teams, like when the West Coast teams go to the East Coast and they play in that, what for us is a either 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. window, depending on the time of year. Those teams usually struggle, right? Little bit concerning on the Cincinnati side is they're 14th in the league in run defense. And you know what ASU's game plan is going to be, especially with Sam Levitt not playing. It's going to be a heavy dose of Cam Scadaboo. It's going to be a heavy dose of Jeff Sims in the run game. But I also very much like Cincinnati's quarterback, Brendan Sorsby. He's got a 13-3 touchdown to interception ratio. So coupling the quarterback injury with the early start and all of that stuff, and the fact that I think Cincinnati's pretty good and underestimated by the nation and by all of us coming into the season, and they're playing pretty well. I'm going to take the Bearcats to win and cover that 5 points.
I'm going to go with ASU to win, but Cincinnati to cover.
Or the other way around?
Yes. So, because is ASU's favored by 5 points? Is that correct?
ASU's getting 5.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go with ASU to pull off the win.
Okay.
I'm looking at Cincinnati's rushing defense, one of the worst in the Big 12. And so while I do think they have some pieces on that side of the ball that could limit Cam Scadaboo, collectively not the best this year. And I think the Sun Devils, led by their rushing attack, they get win number 6, and they're going bowling under Kenny Dillingham. How about that?
Wow. You're very bold this week, Justin. Brett's also going with ASU. And Brett like takes a lot of favorites, and that's why he probably beats us in the season long standings, because he goes with the chalk. But he's taking ASU as well. So all right, you guys are going with the dogs for each of the first 2 games. All right. So speaking of dogs, this is like 2 teams that are both been struggling a lot this season. This is Houston at Kansas. This is a 12:30 game, like the Cincinnati Arizona State game. It is also on ESPN Plus. When there's 7 or 8 Big 12 games, a couple of them are going to be on ESPN Plus every week. Houston is getting 5.5 points in this game. The last time we saw the Cougars, they upset TCU on the road on a Friday night. They changed quarterbacks. Zion Chris went in, and it was a big difference for the worst offense in the Big 12. He had a 71-yard TD run. He was also very efficient passing the ball. Houston had been shut out in its previous 2 games. So, the fact that they were able to score and move the ball was a big deal. Kansas is also coming off a bye. Kansas has lost 5 games in a row after beating Lindenwood in the opener. But the average margin of defeat in those games is just 5.6 points. So they've been right there. Lance, we've had terrible luck, riding the Kansas bandwagon this year. Like, I think they've lost for me or whoever's picked them every single time, but I'm going back to the well.
Yep.
I just think Lance Leipold he's too good of a coach to allow this to continue. And, I don't think Houston has solved all of its problems just by changing quarterbacks. So I'm going to take Kansas. I'm going to lay the 5.5 points.
I'm right there with you with Kansas winning, but I think Houston covers. Houston, if I'm not mistaken, they went on the road and played against Oklahoma and kept it very close.
They did.
Only lost by
16 to
12.
12. Yep.
So I think Houston, they are much better than their record shows, but I think Kansas, losing 5 in a row and that close of a margin, I think after being able to hit the reset button over the last couple of weeks, it's at home. I think Kansas pulls out the win and gets their second win of the season, but I like the Houston Cougars to cover.
Brett is taking Kansas, as am I. All right, so next game on the docket is a 1 p.m. game. That is Baylor at Texas Tech. This game is on ESPN2. Baylor is getting 6.5 points on the road in Lubbock. Both teams are coming off byes. As we know, Texas Tech beat Arizona last time out, and Baylor lost at Iowa State. Texas Tech is still first in the conference in scoring. And Baylor is 15th in total offense. Texas Tech, 15th in total defense. Baylor, near the bottom in rushing defense. A lot of concerns statistically on that side of the ball, to say the least. Taj Brooks, in yards per game, leads the league in rushing. He missed a game earlier this season. When you look at yards per game, he is number 1. He's a workhorse. This is one of those games where all the numbers say Texas Tech, but I just don't think there's that big of a difference between these two teams. Like when you look at the rosters, like 1 through 85, I think Baylor is due to do something surprising. They came so close to Colorado a few weeks ago. I'm going to take Baylor straight up to pull the upset here.
Wow.
And win this one. Hey, man, this is not nearly as big a wow as Oklahoma State winning at BYU, is it? Like, not even close. So come on.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Touche.
Yeah.
Now I'm going with Texas Tech to win. I was talking to you mentioned how BYU is so great at everything, and I'm like, the Big 12 is so drunk. Give me Oklahoma State. To me, my logic for picking Texas Tech to win and cover was all the things that you just mentioned. Baylor on the defensive side of the ball, what Texas Tech does very well. It just seems like all the numbers are trending towards Texas Tech winning this game. But hey, Dave Aranda is coaching for his job right now, and I think Baylor is trying to play for Dave Aranda to keep his job. But I'm going with Texas Tech to win and cover.
If that happens, they'll be 4-0 in conference play. Texas Tech. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Brett is also taking Texas Tech in this one. All right, the next game on the docket chronologically is our game, so we will skip that one for now and move ahead to the 4:30 p.m. matchup between UCF and number 9 Iowa State. This game is on FS1. It is in Ames, Iowa, and the Knights are getting 2 touchdowns in this game, 14 points. KJ Jefferson has been benched. Ja'Cory Brown, I guess, is taking first-team reps at quarterback for UCF this week, which is never a good sign when you're making a mid-season quarterback change. Guy that you brought in from Arkansas in the portal, kind of a much ballyhooed type of acquisition. UCF has lost 3 in a row. That's why they're kind of in this mode right now. They've scored only 13 points in each of the last 2 games. Iowa State played such a clean game in a tough spot against West Virginia last week. They were +2 in the turnover margin. They had only one penalty the entire game. They have the number one scoring defense in the league, allowing only 11 points per game. Interesting about UCF is despite all of their issues, they're still first in the league in total offense. Of course, Iowa State is first in the league in total defense. So that's how they can counteract that. Are they going to be able to run the ball against Iowa State? That's the question. That's how UCF can stay in this game and keep it close. I think that at some point in time, the Cyclones are going to have like a letdown game or a game where they're just not at their sharpest. And this to me feels like a vulnerable spot for them. So I'm going to take Iowa State to win, but UCF to cover with those 14 points.
Man, UCF, it was looking like they were going to be one of the better teams in the Big 12, how they set the tone rushing wise. I mean, they were, I think, at one point, like a top 5 rushing team in college football. Like they were really good. And now, for some reason, the wheels have kind of fallen off of the Knights. And then you look at Iowa State, they have their best start since 1938 when the Great Depression was happening. So the Cyclones are having a magical season this year. And I do agree that the letdown game is coming, Michael Lev, but they got, I think, Texas Tech at home after the bye. Texas Tech is a really good team, as we just talked about. Plus, they got to go on the road and play against Kansas, and then they got to go on the road and play against Utah, and they have Kansas State later on. I think the letdown game is coming, but not for another couple weeks. I like Iowa State to take care of business, but I think they win by 10 points. I think UCF will cover.
We're all in agreement on this one. Brett is doing the same. He's saying Iowa State to win and UCF to cover. All right, Kansas State at West Virginia. This game is on Fox. It is at 4:30 p.m. This is, I think, the only road favorite of the week this week. The Wildcats are giving 3 points to the Mountaineers. This is what I would call a sandwich game for Kansas State, like between two like games where they're going to be really hyped up. Could be a little vulnerable. Last week against Colorado, next week against Kansas. One of their big rivals. That's a concern. But West Virginia had everything going for it last week. They had a night game. It was a national TV game. They had their awesome coal rush uniforms, and they could not get it done. I think that Kansas State, to me, is still the best team in this league, and that'll be proven over the course of the season. Avery Johnson kind of had a breakthrough at the end of that game last week, throwing the winning touchdown pass at the end of the game, using his arm and not his legs. Kansas State is a similarly structured team to Iowa State, which just went into West Virginia and beat them pretty soundly. So despite the fact that it's a sandwich game, I'm still going to take the Wildcats, Kansas State, to win and cover that 3 points.
Yeah, I think West Virginia, even though they are in the top half of the Big 12 when it comes to rushing defense, and I'm not sure what they're like when it comes to creating turnovers, but I do like West Virginia in this game. I think they will match up very well. I think this is going to be a very close game, and it's going to go all the way down to the wire. The key is Avery Johnson. Can he avoid making the stupid throw, right? Avoid being the hero. I think if they can allow Avery Johnson to use his legs and get those running backs going, and if they could just play clean football on the road, I think Kansas State will win. It would not surprise me if West Virginia pulls off the upset here, but I'm going to go with the Wildcats to win by a touchdown.
Brett is also taking Kansas State. As you like to say, Justin, defense and running game travel.
It does,
right?
Man.
So Kansas State's got those things going for it. By the way, the last game, the Kansas State's got a really pretty easy schedule until the last game of the season, which is the Farmageddon matchup against Iowa State, which could be that could be an epic, maybe next year's Farmageddon's in Ireland. But this could be one of the biggest Farmageddon games that there's ever been. If the teams stay on their current tracks. Okay, when we get home from Arizona Stadium Saturday night, we will be treated to TCU against Utah. This is the late night window, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. we finally have clarity in the Utah quarterback room. Poor Cam Rising is out for the season. Guy just has no luck. His body's just breaking down. He cannot stay healthy. I view this in some ways as a positive. Like we got a plan now if we're Utah, right? We know who it is and what it is, and it's going to be Isaac Wilson, the freshman, who's got a lot of ability, doesn't have a lot of experience. Utah's got to be so incredibly frustrated with the way the last couple of games have gone. Very similar to Arizona, like a lot of wasted possessions, empty possessions where they're just coming away with nothing. Meanwhile, TCU's kind of a mess. Josh Hoover had 0 picks in the first 3 games. He's got 6 picks in the last 3 games. Even with Cam Rising being like, I was 60% in that game against ASU, 40%, like could barely move, could barely throw the ball. They still outgained ASU, right? They were -4 or they turned the ball over 4 times. That's not going to happen again. Sorry. This is going to be a buttoned up, angry Utah team that's going to take out all of its frustrations on TCU. I'm going to lay the 4.5 points. I'm going to take the Utes.
Yeah, as soon as I saw this game, I said, poor TCU. Like, I think Utah is going to take out all their frustrations from the last couple of weeks out on the Horned Frogs and Sonny Dykes as well. He's in a very tough spot because, just a couple of years after taking TCU to the national championship, they haven't really been able to replicate even close to the success they had during that season. And especially this year, I think TCU has struggled a lot, despite Josh Hoover being one of the top passers in the Big 12. Utah, the situation with Cam Rising is interesting because could he come back next year?
He could come back for an 8th year.
So Cam Rising is going to get his doctorate at Utah, playing his 8th year. Could we be seeing future BYU quarterback Isaac Wilson playing quarterback for the Utah Utes? Because his brother played at BYU. He's from the area. If Cam Rising decides, hey, Isaac, I'm going to come back for another year, is Isaac going to be like, yeah, I'll sit out another year? No, he might just say, screw it, I'm out. I'm going to BYU. I'm going to a place where I know I can play. So that's going to be interesting to see moving forward. But I think Isaac Wilson, like you said, Lev, a little green, a little raw, but you see the potential of Isaac Wilson. And plus, he's got playmakers around him. He's got a great offensive line. He's got a great running back in Micah Bernard, great tight ends led by Brant Keithy. Of course, Dorian Singer is a playmaking wide receiver. The weapons are there. Be Chris Paul. Be the point guard. Don't do too much, and Utah will be just fine. I think the Utes win and cover.
Yeah, a lot of AARP NIL jokes about Cam Rising were floating around the interwebs when it was announced that he'd missed the season, but that he could come back for an 8th year, which I personally don't think he's going to do. All right, last game is our game. This is Colorado at Arizona. It is at 1 p.m. at Arizona Stadium. It is on Big Fox. And the line is weird. I got to tell you, Arizona is favored in this game by a field goal. And that's how it was when I sent out the games this week to you guys. And, oh, by the way, Brett's also taking Utah in that last game. I don't know why the line is the way it is.
Me neither.
It's very strange. And it feels like it should be the other way around, right? You're talking about an Arizona team that is now next to last in the Big 12 in scoring after scoring 61 points in their first game. Their average is only ahead of Houston. That's worrisome. As mentioned earlier, they haven't run the ball consistently. Colorado is actually better on defense than you'd like to think. They're 4th in the league in total defense. Shedeur Sanders leads the league in passing touchdowns, completion percentage, passing yards, efficiency rating. Number 1 in all of those categories. As we mentioned earlier, the injuries are going to play a huge role in this game.
Yep.
If Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn are ready to go and Tacario Davis is not, that is a huge advantage for Colorado. I don't know. I think there's a formula. I think there's a path for Arizona to win this game, but they would have to execute it to a T. And I'm just not sure they're capable of it. So I'm going to take the Buffaloes to win this game outright.
Right there with you, Lev. I think that this is going to be a huge game for several prospects, including T-Mac and Tacario Davis. On the other side, you got Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. And when you add in Jonas Avianaya, I mean, we're talking about 5 potential first-round picks on the field on Saturday, which is pretty crazy to think about. But, yeah, I look at Arizona's issues on offense over the last 5 games, their inability to score the football. And even when they have dominated time of possession, they have still lost games. Look at the Texas Tech game. So until Arizona can come out and prove me wrong, I got to go with Colorado to win this game. I think Arizona, one thing about them, and Brent Brennan has lauded them for it, they play with a lot of effort. They play with a lot of fight. I will give them that. Even when they're kind of getting blown out, they don't look completely dejected and checked out. Like they're trying to fight and win games here. I think they show that. It's homecoming. You're going to have Khalil Tate as the honorary captain. He's had a lot of luck against Colorado. Maybe that's what's going to lead them. Maybe that's why Vegas has Arizona as the favorite. The lucky rabbit's foot that is Khalil Tate is in the house. So maybe it's with the Desert Ghost, a.k.a. Mr. October, at the game, Arizona can figure out a way to win. But I just look at what we know, and what we know is that Colorado has one of the more electric offenses in the Big 12 in all of college football. Arizona's secondary is banged up, and then their offense can't score points. Knowing what we know, I'm going with Colorado to win.
Yeah, Khalil Tate, when if they see him coming on that Colorado sideline, I mean they've got to cower, because that guy, I mean, he killed them. Like not only that 327-yard rushing game, but every subsequent time that he faced them, he put up huge numbers. Never lost to the Buffaloes, so I think an inspired choice for the honorary captainship. Anyway, Brett is also taking Colorado in this game. I cannot remember the last time all 3 of us went against Arizona in a game. So it probably means that the Wildcats are going to win, which would be great.
You're welcome, Arizona fans.
Good. Yeah. It would be a possible turning point for their season. They got another home game next week. The schedule eases up a little over the second half compared to the first half. There are opportunities out there, but you got to play well.
Yeah.
And especially on offense, they haven't played well, and now injuries are catching up to them on defense. So you combine those 2 things, and I'm just very concerned about the way things could go on Saturday. They're going to have to play, to me, an almost perfect game to pull this off because of the circumstances that they're in and that we've talked about.
Arizona versus Colorado, 1:00 kickoff at Arizona Stadium. We'll have all the coverage on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. We appreciate you guys for listening and watching on Tucson.com. Please subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcasts.